Hello and welcome to the first video of 2019, brought to you by Sport Goth Aesthetic. I wanted to talk about something that I have talked about many times before, though it's one I haven't really talked about in quite some time. It used to be a really regular occurrence for me that I would get a question on Tumblr, on Twitter, in a YouTube comment, wherever, and it would take this similar format. Would you date somebody who was blank? And that blank can be filled with many different things. It could be like a disability, it could be a certain gender, sexuality, anything like that. And I would answer these questions, you know, honestly, with a lot of sort of passion and conviction. One of the things that I would say commonly to that would be not to base your sort of self-worth on whether or not somebody else wants to date you, something along those lines. Say it with me now. Your value as a person is not determined by who wants to or who doesn't want to date you. The reason that I want to talk about that, again, is because I get it. In the past, I was on the other side of that question. I was never really concerning myself with who would want to potentially date me. I never really worried about how the world perceived me whatsoever. So answering that question and giving that advice was really easy. I had a realization recently that I've essentially been asking that question to no one and to everyone regarding myself. I found myself worrying about how people look at me and whether or not they would even consider dating me. And I've allowed myself to get upset about that. And if there was some, friggin' aggressively optimistic YouTube person from, a couple years ago answering these kinds of questions, I might have shot off an anon message to them saying, hey, would you date a non-binary person? And I would hope to get some kind of positive response from that to make me feel better. In this, the new year of 20 by teen, I want to try and cultivate an aggressive self-belief. I want to cultivate this sort of knowledge of self and this action with that knowledge. I found myself being concerned with how people perceive me. Of course I have. I have changed my presentation. I have socially transitioned into a new gender. That's a big thing that should not be understated. Naturally, what's going to come with that is a little bit of insecurity. I'm not going to sit here and slap myself several times and being like, do that better, because yeah, there's going to be some insecurity when you do stuff like that. Anytime any of us goes through any kind of life transition in which something changes or we're moved to a new city or go to a new school or new job, anything like that, there's going to be a little bit of insecurity. The challenge that I want to issue myself and somebody else out there who might be going through any kind of life change is simply to try and tune that down a little bit and remember something relatively simple, and that's you know yourself better than anyone else does. With that little tidbit of knowledge, it doesn't really matter what other people think about you, because here's the thing, their perception of you is limited. Right? And if you're relying on somebody who doesn't even friggin' know you to tell you who you are or tell you what your value is, you're just doing that mathematically wrong. The thing about it though, is that it's really easy, because when somebody does do something that uplifts you and makes you feel good about yourself, or makes you feel included in something, it's like an aggressive dopamine hit, and it feels so good, and it can send you into this like frenzy of confidence. The thing about it though is that it's short lasting. What I want, and what I want for anyone else is something a little bit more intrinsic than that, where we're not concerned if somebody wants to make out with us, and we're more concerned with whether or not we want to make out with ourselves. What I mean by that is not like literally, although that could be fun. Maybe another time. What I mean by that is simply when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you have this feeling, this sort of contentment in knowing that all of the things that are within your control, you're doing the best you possibly can do? Like, that's the kind of feeling that I want. Because the thing about existence, y'all, is that you're just one little tiny little speck amongst a myriad of specks. And by myriad, I mean an almost infinite amount of other specks. You're one little tiny piece of the gigantic puzzle. Most of the things that happen to us, most of the situations that we find ourselves in, we're going to be out of control of most of that. And I think growing up is just realizing, just how little control you have over things. That does not mean you don't have control over things, though. Remember that. You're in control of your actions. You're in control of your reactions. You're in control of your intent. And maybe all of those things don't go perfectly, but if you're doing the best you can with what you've got, that's all that you can do. I could sit here and answer a question like, would you date somebody who is non-binary? Would you date somebody who is disabled? Would you date somebody who is blank? And I could sit here and say, oh yes, you're beautiful. Somebody out there wants to kiss you. Sure, yeah. I could do all of that, and that would be honest. But I want to get to a point in my life, and I want other people to get there too, where we're not concerned with that. Wanting a romantic relationship or to just date somebody or whatever kind of interaction that you want with another person, that's not a bad thing. It is okay to have those kinds of desires. In fact, I would encourage those kinds of desires if you're feeling them. It's a very human thing, and it's a very worth it thing. But it is not everything, right? In fact, it's not even close to being everything. It's not even close to being most of it. It is simply a piece of the world and a piece of your ability to live a life. And it's also a piece that really has no bearing on your value as a person. You have value just because you exist. It's there, I promise. Just because you're here, therefore you're valuable. What each of us is tasked with is a set of, circumstances and things, and we get to do whatever we want with that. We might as well make something amazing out of that. And the things that happen to us are simply things that happen to us. They don't define our entire existence. They don't define who we are or what our value is. What defines that is the way in which we react to that, respond to that, and act based on what other circumstances that we're in. And to be honest, for me, if I see somebody behaving in that kind of way, that's real attractive to me, personally. And so hopefully, that's a little bonus on top of that. Maybe people will want to date you, but it's not the be-all end-all. I hope some of that made sense. I needed to make that video for myself. I really did. If you have any thoughts whatsoever, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I would love to read your comments. I'm going to try and respond to them as much as possible. Also, New Year's resolution, I'm going to try and post 4 videos a month, every month from now on. And I haven't posted more than 3 videos in a month in 2 years. So we're going to go for it. We're going to do it. That's all I got, though. I'm about to go friggin' roller skating. And I hope that even if you're not going friggin' roller skating, that you're going to friggin' do something that you're going to enjoy. But yeah, I'm going to go. There's links in the description to Patreon. There's all other stuff down there. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.